Hello, everyone, and welcome to the More Than Able podcast. I'm your host, Margie Ainsworth, and I'm really excited to introduce this episode. My special guest is Sue Schettle, who is the CEO of ARRM, which stands for the Association of Residential Resources in Minnesota. The mission of ARRM is to advocate for, inform, and support Minnesota organizations serving people in the disability and mental health communities. ARRM is a statewide trade association representing home and community-based residential service providers, supporting about 30,000 people with disabilities in Minnesota. Sue has been the CEO for 8 years, and I'm excited to have her on the show. In this episode, we'll talk about the current challenges facing service providers in Minnesota and how that is affecting those who rely on special services. We also talk about the current funding and staffing crisis that is making it difficult for those with disabilities to get the care they need. And we talk about what can be done to improve the situation. This is such an important conversation, so let's get to it. Hi, Sue. Welcome to the More Than Able podcast.
Hey, Margie. How's it going?
Great. And yourself?
Pretty good. It's a bright day outside. It's all good.
Oh, I love it. Sue, can you tell me and our listeners a little bit about you? Like, where did you grow up and what led you to ARRM?
Sure. I grew up in Stillwater, Minnesota, so the St. Croix Valley area. And actually, I didn't move far. I just moved across the river. So I live in Wisconsin right now. My husband and I have 2 kids, and we have 1 grandbaby and another one on the way. So life is full circle. And it's what brought me to ARRM is really, 2 things. I've been running associations for a while. So I have a prior history of running a medical society. But I came to ARRM primarily because I wanted to fill a void that was clear and present when I was at the medical society. And that was my personal passion. And that is because I have an adult niece who is somebody who is supported by providers. She's someone with a few disabilities, but she's actually very independent and very able, and she lives her best life. And so to be able to work for Heidi and her friends is what brings me to work every day, and I just love it.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. So, ARRM represents providers across Minnesota, but behind every provider are real people with disabilities and families depending on them. When you think about ARRM's role right now, what do you see as the most urgent responsibility you carry?
Well, we have a lot right now, so there isn't just one. I think the thing that we focus on the most is the integrity of the services that are being offered and the availability of the services for people who need that support. We're seeing right now that there's an erosion in that area. And so our role as a trade association for providers is that we need to make sure that what's happening is not impacting people that are receiving and needing those services. We have to shine a light on that. So I think that's our biggest responsibility, is that we have to make sure that programs and services are there, and that also we have the workforce to support it. We have a lot of issues in those areas, and so we've been focusing on that a lot.
That's very insightful. Thank you for sharing. Minnesota often prides itself on being a leader in disability services. In your view, where are we still leading and where are we quietly falling behind?
Well, so what I've uncovered, I've been at ARRM now for 8 years, and what I've learned from my colleagues from across the country is Minnesota is really innovative and ahead of a lot of other states in how we deliver services. We have a very strong focus on person-centeredness. So people that are receiving services are very involved in the decision making about what they want and what they don't want. That's not always happening in other parts of the country. So we have that going on. We have a lot of options for people that, again, aren't available in other parts of the country. So I think what we have built here is really a model for that can be replicated across the country, but it's you have to have willing partners to do that. And we certainly have challenges. There's no doubt about it. But I think the things that we have going on here in Minnesota in the home and community-based services space is really innovative.
Wonderful. If you could sit every Minnesota legislator down for 2 minutes, what would you want them to understand before they make another decision about disability services?
Oh, Margie, that's a good one. I mean, I don't think I could take it would take longer than 2 minutes, but I think the thing that has been the most challenging for me where I sit is that we all want people with disabilities to have access to all the things. We want everybody to live independently if they choose. We want services to be delivered in the community in the way that the person wants. We want all the things that people without disabilities have access to. But the thing that's been the most challenging is that we build this vision of what we want in the state, but we don't adequately fund it. And we the Health and Human Services, so where our stuff sits within the budget, it's a big line item, very big line item. And so it's an easy target for legislators when they're looking at cutting back on how much money they're spending in the state. So I know why it's under scrutiny and I know why it's being looked at, but I feel like sometimes we're talking out of both sides of our mouth. We want to build this infrastructure and this vision for people with disabilities, but then the other side of it is we're not wanting to fund it to the level that it needs to be funded to support the person, but then also to support the workforce. Many of the people don't make enough money to support their household. So they're doing this work as a passion because they enjoy working with people with disabilities. It fills a void in their life, just like it does for me. But the legislature needs to hear that the funding has got to be there in order to support the individual, because it's just such a vital part of the workforce and a vital part of how we actually fund this work across the state. I'm worried, as I've been working at ARRM now for, again, 8 years, I'm worried that we're at a tipping point. Like there's a lot of things that are not going great. And that has to do with some of the issues we're seeing around fraud, which is obviously terrible. We want to make sure that gets shored up and that we get our hands around that so that is not going to be a narrative anymore. And we're well on our way there. But I'm worried that what's going to happen with just that issue alone is going to cause increased scrutiny and increased pressure on an already really fragile delivery system. And not to say that we shouldn't be focusing on fraud, we should, but it's just the way we're doing it makes me worried that people that receive services are going to be left out, and they're not going to be supported in the way that they need to be supported. We're hearing about that a lot in the media. I don't know if you're listening to those kinds of things, Margie, but I definitely am.
Yeah, and I've actually I do a segment every Monday called Mondays with Margie, and my episodes lately have been on those topics because you're right. It is a scary time, and there's a lot of people who are unsure of what's going to happen. I've had close friends reach out to me and be like, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen with my services. So thank you for shedding a light on it. And I'm like, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's scary because so my organization represents providers, right? And so Providers are, they have hundreds, in some cases, they have hundreds of staff members that they have to pay payroll to, right? So when there's a disruption in services, sometimes there's payment withholds. And so as Minnesota is standing up their fraud prevention efforts, in some cases, providers are not getting paid for weeks and weeks. And so you think about from the provider side of things, they can't afford to make payroll, so they can't afford to pay their staff. So the staff are unable to go and support the individuals who need that support.
Thank you for shedding light on that. That's really helpful. So there's a growing gap between what government policy promises and what providers can realistically deliver. From where you sit, literally and maybe figuratively, where is that gap widening the fastest and who's paying the price for it?
Well, the biggest issue we have in disability services from where I sit is the lack of a workforce. I mean, you've heard me say that a couple of times, but it's a for real thing. People are not want people. The turnover rate is crazy for people that come into this sector. Like 60% of the people that come into disability services leave within the first year. They don't stick around because the work is really challenging, and they're not getting paid enough to support their families and their lifestyle. So I think the promise of again, it kind of, we talked about it a smidge ago, but it was like, we're trying to create this really amazing opportunities for people with disabilities, but yet the funding isn't there to support how we're going to deliver that. So the promise is there, but the actual reality of it is really challenging, and the workforce side of things.
So true. When services are capped, delayed, or frozen, what does that actually look like in someone's day-to-day life who relies on these services as a disabled person?
But let's say you're living in a community residential setting with three other people, so four people there. If services are capped, you're not going to have the person in your home for as long, meaning the staff member that's coming in to support you. That person will not be there as long as you need them to be. So, and what we saw during COVID, and it's actually kind of transferring over still now because of the funding cuts, is that people who wanted to get out into the community to do things like everybody else wants to do, the staffing isn't there to support that. And people are unfortunately not able to get out and do the things that they want to do. And that can mess with your mental health. That can just make it sort of has a trickle down effect for those people that are relying on those services. So it's, a lot of times you have to put your life on hold when that happens. You can't do the things that you would want to do. So those are just two examples.
That's very great information. Thank you. Many reforms are framed as efficiency or accountability measures. How are these working, in your opinion?
Well, some of them are working fine. I think the issue around transparency is important. I think there's been a great deal of focus on that, especially now as we're entering into the issues around fraud and making sure that information that's being put into the system is transparent. Providers know what they're supposed to be doing, and regulators are watching that as well. So I think that's one thing. There's increased focus on measurable outcomes, which is a thing. When you look at a person's total expenditures, we're wanting to make sure that the individual is getting what they need for the money that's being put into it. So an individual is being supported in the way that they want to be supported, and that the outcomes of that support is what you're wanting. So those are a couple of examples of that.
Thank you for sharing. Parents of adults with disabilities are aging, as you know, worried and often exhausted. What are they telling ARRM right now that should be keeping state leaders awake at night?
Well, families are not members of ARRM, so we don't hear usually from families.
Okay.
I can tell you from my personal experience, I'm worried about it for my niece because she is someone that will she needs support, and her mother passed away recently, and so I'm seeing it in real time with her that she's someone that we were scrambling a bit after my sister passed away to find support and services for her because the safety net is not there for families who rely on direct support staff to come in. There's not if for example a direct staff member was supposed to come in and support my niece in her home for 3 hours a day, all of a sudden they're not there. That safety net is not there to help her out. So that worries me a great deal that we're not investing in those kind of scenarios for people that need that support long term. I think there has been some movement in that regard, but man, we really need to do a better job of that looking forward into the future because it's going to hit hard, especially as the baby boomers. I know they're aging and they are, I'm kind of right on the edge of that one. So, I think it's only going to get worse as time goes on. So having forward thinking leaders within the state, within the legislature, and certainly within DHS about putting those supports around individuals is something that we need to be worrying about and working on.
Well, I'm very sorry for the loss of your sister.
Thank you.
And your niece is very lucky to have you in her corner.
I turn that around. I think we're lucky to have her because she was, yeah, I was, what I find, what's been helpful for me as her aunt, and I'm her godmother as well, but she's not much older than my children. And so when she was, when my kids were growing up, she just was there all the time. And my kids helped a lot in some of her activities that she had going on. And she just was a great part of our life. So it really normalized the fact that, people with disabilities should live just like everybody else and have the same experiences. She came on vacation with us and did things with us as a family. So I think that just gave me I gave not only me, but my family the option to see that you can actually, this is a thing that we should all be investing in and working toward.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. If the current trajectory doesn't change, what does the system look like 5 years from now for people with high support needs?
Well, this will happen. My prediction is that ARRM has we have members that range from really small, so they have like maybe one home that they're supporting to larger, very large organizations where they have hundreds. And to be honest, we have most of our members operate CRSs, so community residential settings. But they also, a large number of them also offer in-home supports. So they come into your home, they support you in whatever it is that you need support for. And so the thing I see though, and I have been seeing it over the last few years, but into the future, I think it's going to be more, and that is integration of some of these larger organizations will be purchasing or acquiring some of these smaller providers because the challenges around workforce, the challenges around payment for their workforce, and actually just for the whole system is really challenging for a small provider. So I see that there's going to be a more of a I guess consolidation of providers in the state, which is a good thing in some regards, but some people would say that it's not the best thing for everybody because your choices will be less, so you'll have less providers to choose from. I think the other thing is that that really does concern me is that Minnesota has been a leader, as I said before, in home and community based services, but we're also we have a lot of less individuals who are served in institutional type settings. But I see a drift going back to that, because if there are fewer options and there are fewer providers, does that mean that we're going to take a step back 10, 20 years to what we were doing back then, where you see people in larger congregate settings because you simply don't have the providers or you don't have the workforce to support them? I hope that doesn't happen. I see that as being something that none of us would want to have happen, but I see that as a potential, which is kind of scary.
That is very scary.
I guess I'll say a couple more things if you don't mind.
Of course, of course.
So the other thing I think that'll be challenging is that the family, the natural supports is what the term is, the family unit around an individual that's there right now, that might also diminish because in some cases family members are able to get some reimbursement for supporting an individual that needs support. There are funding mechanisms within Medicaid that do that, and it's intended to allow a person to continue to live in their own home, so that they can have their own house, and rather than moving into a group home. So the intention is to make sure that the family unit is able to obviously have an income while supporting a person that needs somebody there. I see an erosion there. There's been a couple of proposals on tap that are looking to remove that or minimize that, and I think that will have an impact on a lot of families. Gloom and doom, right? I'm trying not to be gloom and doom.
No, that's absolutely wonderful information.
Okay, well, good.
What role do advocates, families, providers, and the general public each need to play to support a positive experience for everyone moving forward?
Yeah, well, advocates are, my organization is an advocacy organization, right? So we focus on all the things that are important to providers. So we focus on, talking about real life consequences of policy decisions. We talk about the workforce issue, which you've heard me talk about a lot here. We talk about all of those things. So I think the role that advocates have are important in telling the story, talking about impacts of proposed legislation or policy decisions. But I would say that and I guess that's our title. We're an advocacy organization, but I think the title also is applicable to families and individuals. You're advocates as well. So, and I would argue that you have the strongest voice, because whatever is happening at the legislature and policy decisions that are happening impacts real people. And our role is to make sure that we talk about the provider side, but families and individuals served are critical in this and have to talk about the impacts on actual people's lives. And that's sometimes, I think, that's lost on good intentioned policymakers. They don't in some cases know what they're proposing and how it will really impact someone's ability to live their best life. I think there's well-intentioned folks out there that do things that just don't make sense. And so it's the role of families and individuals and organizations like mine to raise that up, to talk about it in real life terms, and to bring people in to tell their story. So I think that's those are all important. Families also can talk about, the things that we talked about, like when someone's aging, you can talk about, families can get up there and be, and I've seen it multiple times where you've had older folks, that are talking about the impacts of, what's it going to mean when I'm gone? Who's going to take care of my son or my daughter? So having those stories out there, not only with the legislature, but super important to get in front of the media. The media are trying to tell the story in a way that's interesting, but also really talks about the impacts of things. So both legislature, I know I've been focusing on that a little bit, but it's really, the media is a really important tool as well.
Absolutely, very important. Well, as we wrap up, do you have any closing thoughts?
I think that I'm really. There's been a couple of things that I have uncovered when I've been at ARM, and that is on the provider side of things. People are in this work because they have a personal passion for it. They're not, they're most of the leaders of my organizations grew up in disability services, meaning that they started off as a direct support staff member and they have grown through the ranks and become leaders. And I found them to be incredibly resilient and creative, and they're very dedicated to the people that they support. And I know that that might sound like I'm talking the company line here, but that's not it really. It's I've just been really impressed with the resilience of the team that's out there supporting people with disabilities. I'm worried about the future. I really do think we need to go into this with our eyes wide open and be ready to talk about the bad things that might be coming, but also talk about the good things that people with disabilities have experienced over the last few decades. The community integration piece, I think we all love and want that to happen for the people that we support. So meaning you're part of the community. It's not like it's a separate a separate situation. So I think community integration is a thing that I'm most proud of in Minnesota as well. But I am worried about the future. We know that there's going to be a lot of proposals being brought forward, a lot of ideas being brought forward by policymakers. Our role as advocates, whether you're a family member, a person served, or a provider organization like mine, is to be present, um, to talk about impacts, to be connecting with your legislators about what you're thinking and what you're feeling. They will only do what their constituents, I should say, their constituents really influence their decision making. And I know they want to hear from you. So I feel like the ability to just get out there and talk about your situation is really important as we move forward.
Fantastic. That's all the time we have for today. Sue, thank you for being on the show. And just remember, you are more than able.
Thanks, Margie.
Thank you, Sue.